All right, let's go ahead and get this kicked off. So today I'm going to present on low carb versus high carb and what's best to use. And the thing is, when we set out this year, we wanted to have all new presentations, stuff that we have not presented on that you all have seen before, because many of you have been here numerous times. Some of the talks, especially mine, you've heard, and I've put a lot of them out on YouTube and places like that. So I thought, all right, what's something interesting that I can help out either people that are trying to do their own diets themselves, or if you're trying to coach people and you're wondering, how do I even start someone out? Or what's the best way to transition someone? How do I take them from A to B to C to Z? And high and low carb dieting is one of those things where we see a lot of questions come in. I work with a lot of coaches that have questions. I do consulting. This is one of the topics. They're like, how do I know which way to go? Okay, so we're gonna dive into this. And the cool thing about this, my presentations, typically I like to have fun and poke fun at people like Cliff. Cliff's out with his daughter, so he's off the hook this time. Normally I'm posting a fat picture of Jason Theobald in there. Jason, I don't have any fat pictures, especially because you're looking shredded right now. There may be one in here of a coworker or somebody that's just, I poke fun, but most of them you'll see these awesome clients that I have. And the reason why I like to put my clients in all my slides is because without my clients, I don't have any of this to learn from, okay? So a little bit about me. I've been a diet coach for like 18 years. So old man Gorman, I joke about that, but some of you that are my clients have started to call me old man, which I think is funny. So I'm 47, been doing this for a long time. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I have 4 published books. We do a lot of podcasts, a lot of speaking. My secret power is to try things. If they mess up, awesome. I just learned something. How can I make it better? Literally, I'm never going to be the smartest guy in the room, but I will try anything. And one of the refeeds that we'll talk about why that was important to the first refeed study ever done. And you'll see the different businesses that I'm involved here. Obviously, you guys know if you were here last night, the Fat Muscle Supplement Company, the Synergy Labs, we do our own manufacturing, my coaching company, proud new partner, one of the owners at New Ethics, along with Jason Theobald, Stephanie, and Vince. That's been new the last few months, so that's nice. Premier Telemed, we just signed the paperwork. Brandon, if you would, raise your hand. We've also got a nurse practitioner, Jordan, if you'd raise your hand, she's gonna be on the panel. My partner's over there to where we do a lot of stuff in the telemed community now. So just got that done and kind of officially announcing here in this small room. And this thing's there we go. But most important, you see both boys and then you see little G. So all this stuff we do, it's cool, but that's the most important thing, that whenever you tell someone who you are, that's why I brought Cliff's little girl up earlier. That's a big deal for her, right? So at the end of the day, that's really who I am. Okay, so here's the agenda. We're going to debate low and high carbs. We're going to talk about the debate because there really isn't much of one. We'll talk about the positives and negatives. We'll talk about the of low carbs and high carbs, and then the plan that I found to be the most ideal for health, but the most ideal to take someone's stardom, and then how to transition and use some of these things as tools. And then we'll use some examples as well. Okay, so let's talk about a couple things here. You see, oh boy, right here. This is bodybuilding Jesus on the message boards in 2010. We saw a lot of this, that we grew up in the message board era. Jason, you probably remember like Muscular Development, RX Muscle, like all these places. Bodybuilding.com was a cesspool because you saw a lot of people that would get on there and scrutinize and argue and do all these different things. And it was such a bad era. But you saw a lot of people touting one way or the other, especially prior to 2010. So it was just a highly debated topic. And a lot of it was done by people that were younger. I was younger at the time. And most people were set in their ways because it's what they liked. So you saw all these different concepts: keto, low carb, high carb, carb cycling, refeeds, cheat meals or cheat days. And I've literally done all of those things myself and with my clients. Literally tried them all. And most people in here have as well. So the good thing is experienced trainers and athletes, they would always tout what worked for them. Like that's how you knew. If they were a high carb person, all their clients were high carb because that works for them. And you generally do see that whenever you see a lot of coaches in the industry. Whatever works for them, they push that to their clients. But we can't think that way as coaches. And you can't think that way if you're setting your own plan up. And that's when I'm going to help you learn where to start. So then in 2010 to 2020, the research was out there, but we as a community, the physique enhancement community, we started to really see more into the research and understand it. And we have people here. Bill, if you would raise your hand, the incomparable Bill Campbell here at USF, one of the best researchers in the world on the topic of physique enhancement. And we have people like him that started to bring research in general to light in the physique enhancement and the bodybuilding world. So then it's like, okay, we're all starting to learn. The curve at which we learn things has gone up extremely fast versus the message board days. And if anyone in here was here before the message boards, we had the Muscle Magazine days where everybody's juiced to the gills and you did Jay Cutler, Ronnie Cutler, like here's their workout, here's their 16 ounces of meat, good luck eating that shit, and all these different things. That's what we had to learn from. So if you see there's been a progression, and we're actually in the greatest era right now of the time that you can learn from all the things that we have at our disposal, especially from people like Bill, who you guys are going to hear from tomorrow, and you're going to see a little bit about in my slides. So now what we know separates us from the 2000s and 2010s because we're able to look at things differently now. We have more information. One thing I do want to point out here, we know that a lot of the research out there on keto dieting, low carbs, high carbs, what works, in general, it's not always done on a lot of people like us until people like Bill and Brad Schoenfeld and people got trained individuals. But a lot of the research we see, if you're in a deficit, everything works. Like that's the thing. And especially too with the training. If you train hard, most everything works. Now we're gonna dive even deeper with what we know about the body. All right, there we go. All right, so the number one thing that separates information that we had in the last 25 years is understanding what the research says, understanding what we've learned in the trenches, anecdotally, as athletes and coaches, but then taking what we've seen now with understanding hormones and taking a functional med approach. And I put up a picture of our Elite Physique University podcast. we started that in 2019, Jason Theobald and I did, but I really kind of jumped on the bandwagon. It was people like Jason Theobald and Vince Pitstick that brought the understanding of how hormones and labs and how the body actually works and the systems of the body to physique enhancement. We didn't really know much until these guys really stepped forward. So then I jumped in with Jason. I said, hey, let's start a podcast. Let's get this information out. And that's how I learned really fast. Okay, so now we're 5-6 years into this really becoming pretty prevalent in the industry. So now we have that ability to take and apply to some of the research and what we've seen in the trenches. So if you guys ever listen to that podcast, we're on a little bit of a break because of business has been up, but we'll do more podcasts as we get busy. You pull back and then, we're 110 episodes in. We'll probably do another 50 or so at some point. Understanding hormones and how nutrition affects you or your clients is the most important thing that coaches can learn right now. Because we understand training, we understand macros, we understand all that stuff. But understanding hormones and the systems of the body are going to help you understand which way to approach your nutrition. That's vitally, vitally important. And your training, but we're going to focus on the nutrition. Okay, so let's talk about low carb approaches. So I want to outline two different approaches here. You have quote unquote low carb, and then you have ketogenic dieting. Both are considered low carbs, but they're two vastly different approaches. And if you've ever done both, you know what you feel like when you're actually in keto and when you're not. So there's a big, big difference. So what I want to do is an example here. We're going to focus on 100 carbs or less a day, okay? Let's not get too much into the weeds, counting fiber, any of that, just 100 carbs or less a day. But there's always outliers. There's some people that if I had them eat 150 carbs a day, that's extremely low for them. Those are outliers. I'm just saying in general, let's just focus on 100 carbs or less a day. A couple examples would be a ketogenic diet for a guy, 180 protein, 30 carbs, which is essentially just what's in the food they eat and fiber, and 150 fats. Or maybe for a female, it's 120 protein, 20 carbs, and 100 fats. That's a typical ketogenic setup. A low carb example is the ones that you see there for men and women. So Different with the protein, but essentially low carb nonetheless, but two very different plans here. And you can see the number one example that people think of when they think low carb, you get to eat all the fats, right? It's like bacon, eggs, things of that nature. So let's talk about some of the positives of low carbs. First of all, whenever I say low carbs to a lot of people, what do you think they do automatically, like a client? They're like, oh, they already start dreading it. They're like, oh shit, I got to give something up. I'm not going to feel good. I'm not going to have energy. There's a lot of positives that come out of low carb approaches. Some of them are better insulin sensitivity. And I can give a whole lecture, and I have, just on improving insulin sensitivity. But essentially, if you're insulin resistant or have insulin sensitivity issues and you have trouble with carbs, this is a way that you improve your insulin sensitivity. If you see Jordan at Premier U and your A1C is through the roof and I'm your coach, guess this, of course this went out. Guess what happens? I use a low carb approach to fix your insulin sensitivity, okay? So there's a lot of positives here. Typically you'll see lower inflammation whenever you lower carbs, especially people that eat a lot of processed carbs. Yeah, you can come replace it. You see a lot of people that process carbs. There's a lot of inflammation there. Less hunger. So that's another thing. When you get to eat more fats, it's not as much of a hunger response as when you're eating a lot of carbs, okay? So there's a big difference with that. You definitely get to eat more fats, which is nice because most people, if you're eating higher carbs, obviously most people aren't gonna have high carbs, high fats. You're usually having one or the other. You get to enjoy more carbs. Everybody loves peanut butter, right? Like there's the place to slap in some peanut butter into your diet, okay? So you get to eat more of stuff like that. For a lot of people that have insulin resistant issues, fat loss is going to be easier on the same calories versus a higher carb approach. And that's why we're gonna talk about how it changes calories in, calories out. But I'm telling you right now, even though the research says if you're in a deficit, all diets are kind of the same, this is the kind of stuff that trumps calories in, calories out, because you have something that alters a hormone. Insulin is being altered if you have insulin resistance. So on a lower carb approach, for some people, fat loss might be easier where they've been struggling and they've been eating more carbs. So that's another positive. An improvement in your triglycerides. When I get someone that comes to me, because most people know my journey with cholesterol, it's awful, like awful, like probably the worst in the room. So learning how to improve things like triglycerides that's usually tied to carbohydrates. How do you fix that? With a lower carb approach, right? So if there's something, maybe you came for just the weekend and your triglycerides are elevated, a quick, easy way to approach that with nutrition is doing a lower carb approach, okay? Another positive. Fixing A1C, things like diabetes, pre-diabetes. What else? Is there anything else that you guys can think of that I've left off? I did this on Thursday and I thought, I'm probably missing something here or there. Yes, what's one?
So we ran a keto. I just remember digestion.
Yeah. So your digestion was better on keto? Yeah, there's a lot of benefits. Who can think of another benefit on keto or low carb? Anyone? Go ahead, say it. Speak up loud.
Mental clarity.
Okay.
The brain fog goes away. At least it did the times I've been on it myself. That and digestion. And
Yeah.
it can also help us sleep.
It's good. I got that one set.
Deeper sleep.
Yeah, so there are quite a few benefits. Any others before I move on to the next slide? Yep. The simplicity of it. You know what? Absolutely outstanding. Eating low carb, I can literally not even take food with me. Stop at a gas station, get cheese sticks, not just keto, but low carb. It's super, super easy. You can get, if you're only gonna eat 100 carbs a day, you can get that in a couple meals, right? So it's real easy. The simplicity of it is very, very much easy. Okay, so the negatives of low carb approaches. Now, there's a lot more here than I listed on the positives. And I'll use myself as an example. On a low carb approach, guess what? Cortisol stays higher because when you eat carbohydrates, that helps knock cortisol down. So it's proven, and if you see people that chronically stay on a lower carb approach, and some of us have to for health, you're going to see your cortisol will stay chronically a little bit higher versus if you're eating more carbs. By default, you'll also see, and whenever I look at clients' labs all the time, I see T3 is almost always lower than when they're eating carbohydrates. Mine constantly, because of what I have to do, and I won't get into the whole story with improving my A1C and my cholesterol, stuff goes up and down. So I'm like every 16 weeks, I have to diet to improve my A1C and knock some weight off because of some of the meds I have to take for cholesterol. My T3, it's like 2.1 all the time, which is very low. So it's because I'm a low carb guy because of what I have to do. So you will see that on your labs, and a lot of people don't know that. So there are supplements that you can take out there, like our ThyroBoost Plus is the perfect one, or ThyroBoost, 2 caps at meal 1, but that's something to help keep that up. But it's also tied back to, if you're on a low carb approach, your cortisol is going to stay a little bit higher, which drives your T3 down just a little, okay? So just that's how you pair all that together. The other negative is fats don't fuel the process of protein synthesis as well as carbohydrates. So if you think about that, when you eat protein, say you drink a shake, and then you have a carbohydrate with that, protein turns on muscle growth. Carbohydrates that you eat fuel that process for hours. Fats don't fuel it out as much as a carbohydrate because carbohydrate's a better fuel source for that. So I listed that as a negative. And then on the fat loss side, you see stalls are a lot easier because you see lower T3, because you see cortisol higher. Whenever I have a client on a low carb plan, I know if they're starting to stall, there's things I'm gonna have to do, like a diet break, to drop those things down. So for someone that's on that for a long time and you're like, man, why aren't my folks dropping? That's probably why. They've been low carb for a little bit too long. Less leptin and thermic effect of food when it comes to fats, okay? You're gonna see less of that versus when you're eating more protein, more carbohydrates, when you're having a lower carb plan. And then hormone dysfunction may sit in faster due to the higher cortisol levels. So just all around, when cortisol stays high, most people know it's going to drive other hormones down, progesterone, testosterone, things like that when it's chronically high. So that's another negative side effect. Now, some will see elevated LDL, and a lot of that also depends on what kind of fat you're eating, because when you're on low carb, you're gonna eat more fats. And it's one of those things, if you have too many saturated fats, you can see the LDL shoot through the roof. Now, I'm not gonna do a deep dive on ApoB and Lp(a) because that's a different topic, but some people will see elevated LDL from a higher fat, lower carb approach. And there's ways to fix that, but it's something that you need to be aware of. Performance can definitely suffer. I think anyone that's done low carb versus eating quite a few carbs, your performance in the gym is just never the same. If you're a strength or performance athlete, there's a big difference there, okay? It's just not gonna be a comparison, especially if you're doing it for quite a while. Flatter muscle cells, some people just don't like the way they look. Like, that's me on the right, look like a melted candle, was not my best look here. That was keto and low carb when I was trying to fix a lot of things with cortisol. Me on the left, that's eating 250 carbs a day, managing cortisol, things of that nature. So there's a better look and feel that people like. I don't really care how I look compared to this now, but when you're in the gym, like, let's be honest, we like the way we feel when we eat carbohydrates versus when we're on a lower carb approach. So I listed that as a negative. Some see a loss of mental clarity when they're on low carb. Now on keto, that's different. You have mental clarity, you're running off ketones, you feel great. When you're on a lower carb approach, you're not in ketosis. So a lot of the times you just feel a little bit more run down, you're not as sharp mentally. All right, then I put a note down here. Honestly, low carbs are good in 2 situations when dieting. This is the only time I really like to do them. I don't like to do it long term. I like to do it if someone comes to me and they've been a fatty for a while, like Jason Wells, where you at? Where's Jason? When Jason came to me at 440 pounds, drinking Mountain Dew and eating dry, fast food stuff, we started him with a low carb approach. He'd already been eating probably 700-800 carbs of sugar a day. So why would I start him off on a high carb approach? We cleaned his insulin sensitivity up. I started him lower carb, higher fat. He dropped like crazy. So that is the number one place that I like to use it. And I'll use it, when someone's on carbs and they're just kind of stalled out, cortisol's high, I'll do a real quick run of lower carbs or keto just to get some fat loss off, but I don't do it too long because then they really stall hard. But those are the 2 places I like to do it. I'm not a fan of a lifestyle low carb approach because of these things that I've listed, even though there are times like me that you have to do it. Okay, let's talk about high carb approaches. I think what most people love and like. So who better to represent that than The Rock, eating his epic cheat meals. We're going to focus on these examples, though, as always, there are outliers. There are different people that are going to have more than this. There's probably quite a few people eating more. But just as a general aside, we'll focus on 300 carbs or more for men, 200 or more for women. Now, when I say that, I'm saying either you could be dieting or you're well into the off season and you've been eating this for a while. You're not going to see problems if you're doing this for 2 weeks. Now, if you're in an 8th month off season and you're a female and you're eating 270 carbs, at some point, you're going to see some of these things that I talk about here. So here's a couple examples of a higher carb approach for a guy, 350 carbs a day. And you'll notice most people, when I bring this up, you'll see carbs go up, fats go down to kind of offset that so they can get those carbs as high as possible. All right, so these are just examples. It's not what I do with my clients. These are just examples here. And then you'll see sometimes in the higher carb, lower protein approach, you'll see people lower protein and fats so they can get carbs even higher. That I'm not a fan of at all. But most people think, well, if I lower my protein, I can up my carbs. They don't, the macronutrients are not the same. They're absolutely not the same. Protein acts way different than carbohydrates, especially when it comes to growth. So typically this is what we see as examples. Okay, so let's talk about the positives of higher carb approaches. The perfect person to use an example here is Leslie, okay? But this applies to anyone that's training hard. So Leslie is a performance athlete. Those of you all last night heard she's currently ranked 26th in the world in her age group, on her way to try and make it to the CrossFit Games this year. Now, she's someone that we've done keto, we've done that stuff before in the past, but in a performance-based sport, absolutely not a fan of low carbs. Her body is a machine. It runs doing CrossFit. It runs on carbohydrates. Leslie, how many calories and carbs are you eating a day right now? Yeah, so she's at 300 carbs a day, probably 2,600 calories, 2,700 calories. And she literally is like 6 weeks out if she wanted to diet because her body is a machine. She's not a genetic freak, by the way. Like she can gain fat if she wants, but she's fueling that machine. Okay, so this is a perfect example here. So on a higher carb approach, you're gonna have more energy, better performance and strength, good mental clarity because you're eating carbs pretty much every single meal, all right? Every few hours you're eating, so you're keeping that going and your brain runs off glucose. Carbs, like I said earlier, they drop cortisol. So in a sport, or if you're training extremely hard to put on as much muscle as you can, your cortisol is going to be high. It's nice to get the carbs in there to help knock that down. Where imagine if she were on a lower carb approach, cortisol and CrossFit go hand in hand. Like to me, it's the most, and I hate to say worst, it's the worst sport when it comes to crushing your hormones because of how demanding it is. So it's a big deal that it helps drop cortisol. Carbs also help boost leptin and metabolism. Like that's the thing. On a lower carb approach, you're not gonna see those kind of benefits when you can eat carbohydrates and get that boost in leptin and metabolism. And then I see better thyroid levels on people that eat more carbs. I don't see as many T3s at 2.1. You know, I see a lot of 3s to 3.4, 3.5. That's where we want it. That's a healthy thyroid. It's a healthy T3. And remember, T3 is basically a snapshot of your metabolism. Like that's a good reading on, hey, I got a crappy metabolism at 2.1 or like you're at 3.4. You're like, hey, I'm eating 300 carbs a day and feel good. I'm good to go. If I wanted to diet, I could diet. So you'll see carbohydrates really help with that. And then as I pointed out earlier, there's not a better way to fuel protein synthesis than to pair protein with carbs that I'm aware of. Unless, Bill, you know something that I don't know, but when it comes to fueling protein synthesis, I think protein and carbs are key from all the research that we've seen.
Yeah, and insulin is permissive for muscle protein.
Yeah, so it literally goes hand in hand. So if you're trying to gain as much muscle as you can, or you're trying to hold on to as much as you can, this pairing protein and carbs, that's a positive. What else? What else am I missing for our carb lovers in here that are like, oh, you didn't say this or that? There's got to be something. Anything?
Fuller muscle fibers.
Fuller muscle fibers. Going back to Ryan, who it's all about the look, right? We're all bodybuilders. Fuller muscles. You're going to feel better when you get a big pump in the gym, or if you're on low carbs and you're like, I just can't feel the muscle. That's a huge, huge difference. Okay, what else?
Fun to eat 'em.
Say it again real loud.
It's fun to eat 'em.
Well, it's fun to eat them, of course, yeah. What else? Lisa, resident nutrition, more micronutrients through things like that, especially with vegetables and carb. Yes, 100%.
Trying to build, it's easier to get carbs in.
If you're trying to build, it's easier to get carbs in than a lot of fats. They're easily readily available. They are easy to find, and they're cheap. Carbs are cheap. Potatoes are cheap. If you're poor as shit, you go get a 5-pound bag of potatoes. You're gonna be full. You can live off that and oats. Literally. You really can. All right, anything else before I move on? Helps the nervous system, yes. And that's through knocking cortisol down, right? So we're all doing things that really hit us hard. Let's work with the body. Okay, now to throw Leslie and Jacob back up here, people that don't want to hear the fact that there's some negatives to higher carbs. And by the way, Jacob loves eating bananas. In case you didn't see this picture last night, Jacob loves carbs. He eats bananas every day. And it's a running thing where he has people videoing me. John's videoing me by the bathroom eating a banana earlier. I'm like, I can't even get away from you guys. So, and then Leslie's not happy, you can tell here, because I'm going to talk about the negatives. So hunger can be extremely intense when you're dieting. If you've ever done a higher carb, low fat approach, your hunger is intense. And we've seen that, I would say, in the bro world. It's a tactic that you can use, and it works very well. But back in the day, I saw a lot of what I would say bros that just did cookie cutter diets, super low fat. Everyone was using anabolics. Fats are real low, and you just crank the carbs up and you just go. And that was a common approach. Well, we see that blend into the world where people that aren't using physique enhancement, anabolics and things of that nature. So the fats are real low and their hormones tank. So that's another negative. If you go low fat for too long, your hormones will tank. And then depending on the type of carbohydrates that you eat, or just even high carbs in general, you will see inflammation. It will go up, especially you have to watch your gut health, depending on if you're eating a lot of the Frankenstein foods and Pop-Tarts and all that shit that I championed 10, 15 years ago in my book. I take responsibility for that because I'm like, fit your macros, it's fine. We're well beyond that at this point. Now, everybody that has gut issues, thanks to me, I'm sorry. You got people like Lisa over here. She's like, no, micronutrients, not Pop-Tarts. But there is going to be a higher inflammation versus a lower carb approach. And back when I said this earlier, dieting may be harder for some people on a higher carb approach if they have insulin resistance, higher blood sugar, higher floating around insulin, because that's what can change calories in, calories out. So if you take John and twin John, and we're both dieting on 2,500 calories, and one's eating 300 carbs a day and the other one's eating 100, and we both have insulin issues, insulin resistance, the one on lower carbs, I've seen this in the trenches so many times, this is what changes calories in, calories out, because hormones dictate how many calories you actually need to be in a deficit. Does that make sense? So, John on a lower carb approach is probably going to lose a little bit easier than John eating higher carbs over time, okay? And I've seen that happen. That's why we clean up insulin sensitivity. When you eat higher carbs, insulin and blood sugar stay up, right? Now, they come down. That's the way the body works. But if you're having that constantly higher, your body has to burn through blood sugar and insulin blocks fat loss to some degree. So when that's constantly high, or you have insulin resistance, now you're burning through so much that you have to go at lower calorie levels to now have a new deficit. And that's why it changes calories in, calories out, okay? So if you have clients that are struggling, and you've got a female eating 190 carbs and she should be dropping, maybe her insulin or blood sugar is a little high. When you have her do her labs first thing in the morning, her blood sugar is coming back at 102. Well, her blood sugar's high, her insulin's high, you're having to burn through that, right? So that's how it changes. What else? What else have I missed? Any other negatives to high carb approaches? Leslie? You're full and you can't eat. Oh, the woe. And oh, poor you. You're like the teenager that can eat a pizza and anything you want and complain about, and the rest of us are literally eating like birds. What else? Yes, Nick.
Ran for too high gallbladder issues.
Yeah, say that real loud.
If ran too high for too long, gallbladder issues, reintroduce fats.
That's a really good point. And Nick will be our next speaker, one of the best coaches in the industry. When you run it for too long and then you reintroduce fats, you have to watch the gallbladder. It may have gallbladder issues. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So here's what I have found to be the most ideal. Now, this is something that I can recommend that you all can take. You're going to have all these slides and everything at the end, like you'll have the video. This is what I like to recommend everyone take and be able to adapt from there. So first, remember whenever I say this, to get your labs done, or if you're a coach, having them get their labs done. In 2019, when we started saying stuff like this, people were like, you are not a medical practitioner. I'm not trying to be one. I'm trying to educate you on the things when you do get your labs done, you understand what your labs look like. Not everyone has the nurses at Advanced Vitality that Jason has, or Brandon and Jordan, to people, they go over that stuff with you. But you need to understand what you're looking at. And if you're a coach, it's nice when you learn your own labs, because then when you spot your clients have low T3 or their insulin's very high, you think, oh, I probably need to take them on a lower carb approach versus a higher carb approach. So it's learning that kind of stuff. So first thing to do, get your labs done. Make sure things like glucose, or if you're gonna diet, glucose is under 90. T3, I like to see that over a 3. Total testosterone, free testosterone, very, very important here. I'd like to see mid to upper ranges, because if it's low and you start to diet and you have low testosterone, you're just asking to lose muscle. You don't want that. Other things, make sure your progesterone's not low, reverse T3. You can start there, you can get more in depth, but that starts to tell you if you're having any issues and you're in a place to diet. So from there, once I see everyone's good, I like to start a carb cycling approach. So for dieting, and this is, we're gonna focus on dieting, I like to do 6 days in a deficit and 1 day at maintenance, which is essentially a refeed, which we'll talk about. And from there, once I have someone started on whatever numbers I want to start them on, this is not cookie cutter, then I watch and then I adapt from there. Does everyone see where I'm at here? So if you're dieting, 6 days in a deficit and 1 day at maintenance. Most of us want to start people in a deficit every single day. But I'm going to talk about why that's not a very good idea. So here's an example, and this, I just laid this out. If you're one of my clients, this probably looks somewhat similar as far as the layout. So I like to have like a low day, and maybe that's just an example for a female. Maybe it's 1,500 calories. Her off day is 1,400 because she's not exercising. And then she has one high carb day a week, and maybe that's a high calorie, maybe that's 1,900 calories. Back up to essentially-ish a maintenance, okay? And there's a reason why that's important to plug in there. So here's the key points with this. Your metabolic rate, if I just kept everyone at, say I put her on 1,500 calories every single day and 4 weeks goes by, what do you think is gonna happen? Who knows the term when you stay on the same calories for a long time? Anyone? Adapt, metabolic adaptation, okay? So when someone stays and they don't do anything to boost metabolism with a refeed, they're gonna stall out a lot faster. So it's important to put high carb days in refeeds. So at the bottom, you'll see research done at USF, the refeed study, easy for me to say, in 2017 that Bill Campbell put together. I was fortunate enough to write the diets for that. And the cool thing is Bill came to me at the ISSN conference. I'll never forget it. I was presenting there and you were the president of the ISSN, and we had dinner and he said, hey, I want to do a refeed study. You're doing all this crazy shit with refeeds where you have people eating 2,000 calories once a week, which I did, like a lot. Crazy, 2,000 calories, I'm not even kidding. People were getting shredded, but they didn't see people were also getting fat. So I had like 2 or 3 that got shredded doing that. I had others that were like, they weren't making great progress. Bill was like, hey, you're doing some crazy stuff. Like, maybe we should do a refeed study. And I'm like, well, I'd love to write the diets for that. So here's what we did, and Bill will know this better than I will, but essentially what we did is we took a group of people that had no refeeds, basically same calories across the board. I can't remember if it was 8 or 12 weeks, but it was across the board, same calories. Or we had people that had 2 refeeds. And Lauren, I think if I remember right, you were involved in this, or maybe you had some input with 2 refeeds a week. They were back-to-back days. I wanted like separate them out every 3 to 4 days, but it was better to do them back-to-back days. And that's what we ended up doing. And here's what we saw. Everybody lost fat. If you kept calories the same for say 8 weeks, it was okay. When you gave them a refeed, same calories, but we bumped them up on the refeed days, they lost a little bit more fat. They enjoyed the process better. They had better muscle retention, if I remember right. There were a lot, and if I'm forgetting anything, if you can remember off the top of your head, feel free to shout it out.
The metabolic rate was also significantly elevated.
Yes.
Which attached to the increase in lean mass. So they retain more muscle and a higher metabolic rate.
Yes, exactly. So by having those refeeds, especially if you see it plugged in here, I like to plug them back in at maintenance. At 6 days at a deficit, if you boost that up with 1 day with the refeed, it boosts metabolism and leptin, and it also lets you knock cortisol down for a day. Where if you're just at a deficit 6 days a week, cortisol is going to chronically stay higher. So we see all these things, and we saw that dieting without a refeed is not as advantageous as putting those in. Okay, I don't do 2 refeeds a week, so I know some of you are my clients right now. You're like, hey, where's my second refeed at? I'm like, all right, but at the end of the day, putting 1 in a week is very, very important. And now we have that research, and a lot of research comes from doing bro shit in the trenches, like having your clients eat 2,000 freaking calories on a Tuesday before a show and like winning, and thinking that's the way. Like that's what leads to this kind of research. And by the way, future research, here's what I would like to see. And I don't even know if this is possible. On all the low carb and high carb approaches, what we don't see being measured that I'm aware of is taking something like that and let's also measure cortisol at the beginning and at the end. And whenever we see like all the diets work, we also need to see how they affect T3, how they affect cortisol on a higher low carb approach, because that also affects muscle retention and muscle gain. Hormones are tied into so much stuff that we don't see that in the research. And I assume it's probably really hard to gather all that information. It's probably really expensive, but hopefully at some point in the future, we can tie all it together in the physique enhancement world. And I know your lab literally is leading the charge on that. So that's something I think that would benefit all of us. Maybe 10 years from now, we've got a ton of information. Go ahead.
And after the diet, when you're reversing up, they rebound a lot better when they've been doing it. They had less binging, less negative meditation.
Another good benefit is you have less binge eating after. Listen, binge eating is a real thing. If you've dieted, especially for a show, binge eating after is a real thing. So if you've been doing refeeds, baking in some foods that you like, you're right. It's less of a binge afterwards. Okay, let's see. What else do we have? Okay, so here's what I have found to be the most ideal. I like to take this plan and start it here, okay, for someone dieting. And then I like to work carbs up in the off season to grow from there. I still like to have high days, low days, still a high calorie day like a refeed or a cheat meal, okay? I don't like to lower or raise protein. That should always be set when someone's dieting. Now there are times in the off season I'll have change. I'm not someone that's gonna drop protein down. I'm not gonna drop fats down. I'll alter carbs up and down because you'll see a lot of people play with that because they wanna eat more of something else. I don't alter that. So now in the off season, when you get someone up that maybe they're dieting a guy, like this is Brian Whitaker, I think we had him at 50 fats towards the end. Well, in the off season, I'm not gonna leave him at 50 fats, right? So maybe his carbs get well up into the hundreds and maybe his fats get up to 100, 80 to 100 a day, right? I think Leslie's even eating that much at this point. But there you raise things, but I don't ever alter protein. I leave that the same. It should always stay the same in my opinion. Unless you're doing keto, but that's another discussion. So I like to assess every couple months and then check labs. So as you take your diet and then you start to adjust things up and down, look at your labs. That tells you what to adjust. Labs every 6 months, I think, are a good idea. But as a coach, if you're seeing people struggle or you're trying to diet them, labs, they're your peek under the peek under the hood. Okay? Is your glucose getting too high in the off season? That's common. If you're like me and you're training and 10 years ago, I'm like trying to eat 300-400 carbs a day, same calories, but over time I start to get a little fatter. It's not from eating off the plan, it's my insulin sensitivity started to suffer, which means fat gain's a little bit easier on the same calories. So check your glucose, see if that's running high, check your labs, go low carb for a little bit to clean that up. How many people, we just did a low carb reset for you before your trip, right? I think we're getting ready to do one with you here in the near future. You and I are about to do, I'm pointing at all of you. Get ready. We're about to do it because guess what? Deep into the off season, inflammation was high, body fat was okay, and then all of a sudden it's like, boom, here it is. I just gained 3 pounds too quick. Blood glucose is running a little bit high. We check labs. I'm like, okay, it's time. That, boom, you throw in a low carb approach. You see what I'm saying? There's times that you plug this stuff in and out. It's not about what plan is best. It's about taking these and adjusting to your clients. Here's some other things. We already talked about the stalls that happen real easy. If you're someone that has a client, or it's you, and you're on a plan for a long time, and you're a lower carb person, and you see that stall that hits, and we all know those stalls where it's like you're beating your head against the wall, and you're pissed. You're like, I am a female. I'm 119, and this thing is not moving. And I get these emails too. I'm like, man, she is stressed out. She's like, I'm doing everything to a T. I'm like, scale 1 to 10, how you doing hitting your carbs in your diet? She's like, 10 out of 10. I'm like, okay, low carb. So she stalled. What do we do from there? That's a perfect place to bake in a diet break. Drop your cardio out, raise your carbs up. It knocks cortisol down. It boosts your T3. And guess what? Whenever I do that, most people keep dropping on the diet break when I add the carbs in, and it's higher calories. Well, how's that work? That's some unicorn shit, right? No, it's just you're knocking cortisol down and you're boosting the thyroid up. Renee, we just did yours, and on your, did we do a diet break with yours? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. You keep dropping on your diet break? Yeah. Raised, what did we add, 50 carbs? Yeah, so she was dieting on however many carbs she was eating. We got to a point, it's like, all right, let's diet break. Added 50 carbs, which is only 200 calories. And then she kept dropping. Why? Cortisol went down, T3 went up, she felt better, and that's how you work with the body. Okay, so diet breaks are a perfect way to help break those stalls. Use them to your advantage. I always say this, question everything. Whether it's me up here speaking or Bill Campbell's research or anyone else, if you question everything that we say, try it and apply it, then you can learn from that and you can find different ways to make things work. That's literally what I've done with everything I've ever done with clients. I've tried something, let's fail, let's make it work, let's learn something from it, but question everything. Make it better and then pass it on. All right, thank you very much.